Hey, good morning, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for August 2025. We've got a fantastic book here this month, and it is Welcome to the Maynard by our very special guest who's here live, James Robinson. Man, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the first question's always the same in every interview I do here, because I think it gets to really kind of the point of what we're trying to do with these graphic novel clubs, and it's simply this: it's why comics of all the ways you can express yourself. What is it about comics that speaks to you, that thrills you, that lights you up?
Well, I think, I got into comics when I was very, very young, like 4 or 5. It was one of those things where where you learn to read so you can read comics, But then early on, I began to really appreciate the fact that it was a distinct medium of storytelling in its own right. Something that Europeans, I think, the bande dessinée, Tintin, all of that, and then the Japanese with their manga have kind of more embraced. And once you fall into that world of telling a story in that fashion, where you are marrying words with static images, it becomes kind of an addictive thing. When it's done at its best, it's obviously a medium where if you want to hack out something, you can. It's easier, an image and a word balloon. But if it's done right, it feels so wonderful to either be a part of it or to read something done by someone that really knows what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think once you get that in your system, in your blood, it's hard to let go.
Yeah.
So that's, for me, why I was into it. I went to film school. I got a degree in filmmaking, but comics always have brought me back, and probably will stay. I'll be writing comics until I croak.
Yeah.
I think that's probably it. And then also when you see, there's masterworks out there, Watchmen, Batman Year One, etc., that are perfectly told examples of the static medium and with the text and the word balloons, and also how you tell that, the internal monologue, the conversation, the third person narrative. All of those choices are so interesting. Why they're made, when they're done right, why they're done. I think I'm just looking at Layla Strange over there. That's Ram V, isn't it?
Sure is.
And just the way that the artist has used the visual aspect of that medium to kind of like not subvert, but take things in his own way creatively while staying true to what comics are.
Yeah.
So that's enough of an answer, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. So you say that you started reading comics 4 or 5 or something like that. This was in England, yeah?
It was in England, and then I briefly, like 4 years, lived in Australia.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of it was in Australia, where someone had a deal where they would repackage like 4 or 5 or 6 different DC books as black and white reprints in one like big volume, and with the price of one color comic. Yeah. So as a kid, you sacrifice color, but you get all these stories to read. So that was a big thing for me, was those kind of comics. Back when I was a kid, I'd read a lot and obsess about the character, all the stuff kids do with comics, obsess about the characters and the powers. And I remember it was in one of those that I first read a Justice Society team up with the JLA. And the fact that there was a different Green Lantern and all this Starman, there wasn't another Starman, all that stuff was fascinating to a little kid. Before the internet, where you could just Wikipedia this or that, and you had to find out who they all were and everything else. So that was all part of it when I was a kid, the investigation into the history of it all.
Yeah. No, the JSA was exactly the same thing for me. The first comic that I remember reading, not the first comic I read by any means, but the first one that stuck with me as a kid was Justice League, where the cover is Santa Claus dead in the snow.
Yes.
And the JLA is standing around and going, oh, what's this? But that was, one of those 80-page giants that not only did it have the JLA story in the front, but it also had a backup story of the JSA. And so the JLA story was
100-pager.
100-pager, sure.
And it was the one where Hal Jordan slips in the shower.
Exactly.
And John Stewart takes over as Justice League.
Exactly. The ring flies off his, must go find alternate green. And what a crazy idea that was as a child, right? Like, I was just like, wait, what is this? And then when I got 20 pages in, it changed to the 1940s and a
Yeah.
completely different Green Lantern, and like a key unlocked in my brain, and that was a key story also.
Yeah, that's right.
Was the villain, but of just like, whoa, there's this whole world here that I don't know anything about, but clearly has this huge history, and I want to figure it out. And as you say, before computers, nowadays someone can just go boop, boop, boop. Oh, okay, I see there's 20 Green Lanterns,
But back then it was, for me, almost the same. It was, apart from the story I told you, when I first read back in England as a little kid still, there was 100-page. I believe the original artwork for this beautiful wraparound cover is lost, but it was a Neil Adams cover, and it was like the world's greatest comics, and there was a spotlight and all the different characters.
Yeah.
And when they reprinted that 100-page, I think Dick Giordano had to do like a look-alike because the original artwork they couldn't find it. But that had a list of all the Golden Age characters,
right,
with their first appearance, and some of them like the Ghost Patrol and the Gay Ghost. And like Hop Harrigan, and you'd like, who are these characters?
Yeah.
And there was no information.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's it's interesting. I think that computers make everything really wonderful and nice, and you can get all this information. But I also think it makes weak fans. I mean, I think on a certain level, we're stronger, better fans for that material,
I
because we had to work for it, right? Like we had to build the muscles and learn about these characters and piece together the history, because we weren't encountering it in the order that it was released.
And also, the closest they came to a collection were those 100 pages, or what was that one, Fantasy something over at DC, that would have the All-Stars, the All-Winners in the back. There were those larger comics that would reprint early Spideys when, but that was it.
Yeah.
There weren't these collections. I remember back in the day, one of the paperback publishers began to do these little paperbacks that had like Steve Ditko Spider-Man and it was like seeing the Bible or something for the first time when you were younger. So you're right, it's easy now. I know with writing, I've said this many times, but back when I was doing Starman and a lot of the books, Witchcraft, a lot of the books I've done that include a lot of history. I love doing it, but it was such a commitment, because you're constantly like buying books in case you need them, and there's always going to be what did a Victorian executioner wear to an execution, say? Well, geez, how am I going to work that out? So you'd have to go to the library, look up Victorian executioners. There'd be one book. It wouldn't be in your library, so you'd have to put in an order for it. You'd have to wait 2 weeks. The book would finally come, etc., etc., etc. So it was this game of patience and research. And now, Ben, your son, who's off camera, he could look that up now and just show us a picture. So it's made things easier, but I don't know if it's always made things better.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. So when you were in Australia, you were talking about this publisher that was packaging the DC. Was there a similar thing for Marvel? I mean, were you encountering?
No, Marvel was more. Marvel, my experience. So there was two things. Before I left for I'm remembering now. Maybe they did make their way over to Australia. There was a company in England. I don't think it was DC Thompson. I think it was another company, and they would do black and white reprints of Marvel books, and then they would sometimes put an original British strip in the back, and that was sort of how I encountered the Gene Colan Daredevil. At the same time, I realized that before that there had been the Wally Wood Daredevil,
right?
Short run, but I remember reading him fighting the Matador and him with Namor, where he won't give up and he grabs the ankle and Namor kicks him off and says, "I've never met anyone as brave as you." Those things have stayed with me because of those black and white books. And I would read them until they were just falling apart in my hands. You know? So I remember when I was a little boy, and it's a guilty vice we all share, which is reading on the toilet. Who doesn't love to do that? And I remember going in as a little boy with a pile of comics, and I would sit there reading comics, and my sisters would be banging on the door, and my legs would be numb, and I didn't care. I was in heaven. So, back in the day.
If I remember, the first thing that you did, at least that came out over here, would be London's Dark,
That is the first thing I published, yes. And it was published in England It was published by Escape, and they had had success with Violent Cases, and I was friends with Mike Lake, who ran Titan Distributors, the distribution side of British comics at the time. And and I realized at the time also that what Neil had done is he'd found an artist that really wanted to work with him, and they'd worked together and they'd done this story. And I was lucky enough to find an artist, Paul Johnson, that was interested in doing a book. And it was a little different because Violent Cases is wonderful, but it is very much, if you read it objectively, it is a illustrated short story.
Sure.
There isn't a lot of panel by panel narrative. I don't think there's any dialogue. There might be a tiny bit.
Yeah.
But I actually wrote this script and came up with the idea and everything else. So that was the first thing I did, and it came out. And luckily, that year that it was coming out, Matt Wagner was in England for a British comic convention, and Archie Goodwin was at the same convention. So they both read it. Archie became a fan and wanted to try and find me work. And Matt, at the time, it was a huge leap of faith, really. I don't know quite why he put so much trust in me, but at the time, Grendel was published by Comico.
Yeah.
And his plan was to take a break after issue 40. And then I was going to do what the book I did, Four Devils, One Hell, Grendel Tales. And then Comico went, but I did three of the issues. This is a sidebar, but I've always thought this would be an amazing book to put out if they could ever do it.
Mm-hmm.
The first two issues of the Grendel Tales I did were drawn by Philip Bond.
Oh wow!
And they're in a storage thing in England apparently. And he knows where they are, he just hasn't got them. And I've always thought so. Getting back to the story, they went bankrupt, and the deal that Matt had with them involved their co-ownership of Grendel.
Yeah.
So it got caught up in bankruptcy and everything else, and eventually he made the deal. This was like three or 4 years later. I was already working at DC by then. He got the deal back at Dark Horse, but it was such a long time. He said, "I can't relaunch Grendel with your book. I've got to do War Child."
Yeah.
So that was why the next thing after that was Grendel Tales at Dark Horse, but that took 3 or 4 years, and in that time, Archie Goodwin, who'd had a sort of bad run of it towards the end at Marvel, he was not happy there. So or rather, when he was doing Epic, he was a little bit frustrated. Mm-hmm. So he went back to DC, and that got me, Legends of the Dark Knight, the Golden Age, and ultimately Starman.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested about this part because you were of that British explosion wave, but you weren't doing Vertigo books out of the gate. Right, like you weren't a Karen person.
Well, there's a reason for that. It's that Karen Berger did not have much of a regard for me, and that was because she came to England and she found all the British 2000D artists, but she had the writers she wanted. She via Len Wein, she had Alan Moore, she had Grant Morrison.
Yeah,
this is a story that I know to be true from talking to both Neil and David. She didn't actually want Neil Gaiman. And
funny.
And Dave McKean said, if you want me, you have to have Neil. He was very loyal.
Yeah.
And then as he was working on Black Orchid, she realized he was a good writer, and Sandman came about.
Yeah.
But she had no interest in me, and because DC existed in these little fiefdoms where Denny O'Neil controlled the Batman universe and Mike Carlin the Superman universe and the different places, she was in charge of all of the British talent who lived in England. So I was trying to get my foot in the door, and she was slamming that door as hard as she could.
Wow.
I remember her hanging up on me and just
really
rude.
Wow.
I kind of never forgiven her, honestly. So then I moved to America, and that allowed me to then be an American, I could go to anybody.
Sure.
So that allowed me to get in at DC finally. And also Archie moving over, and he was given this sort of a fiefdom, kind of like Epic, really, like just find interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So that's how I finally got in. But, I was never a Karen person.
Yeah.
And the only reason I did Witchcraft was to say to like, if anybody can do this, well, not anybody, but I can do this.
Sure.
So I wasn't a Karen person or a Vertigo person.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just, I mean, it's just interesting with the timing. That's all to me. That kind of a different tradition. What's the fire going on out there? Good lord.
So in my career, we're up to I'm living in America,
Yeah,
and sort of things began to sort of take off from there.
yeah. Now, wait. So did you move to America because you wanted to work in film at that point, or were you like, no, actually, this comics thing is going to be good?
Honestly, it was neither.
Okay.
It was that I'm trying to think now. So when I first started, when I was so I began writing. I began writing Grendel, and Karen Berger, who was the editor, said you have a choice. We have a very slow turnaround of payments, so we cannot afford to pay you at the moment. So you can write the series.
It'd be Diana Schutz, you mean?
Did I say Karen?
You
Sorry,
did say,
Diana
yeah,
Schutz.
yeah.
Sorry. Diana Schutz
Yeah.
said you can write the whole thing, but we can't stop paying you for 3 months.
Right.
So I had the choice of either waiting 3 months to begin it or starting early. At the same time, Mike Lake, who I mentioned,
Yeah.
was opening a store in Sherman Oaks called Outer Limits. They didn't have because they couldn't call it Forbidden Planet, which was what Titan Books,
Yeah.
the store that Titan Books owned in New York for some illegal reason in LA. So they called it Outer Limits in Sherman Oaks, and he said, "Would you agree to come out and like co-manage it for 3 months?" And I was like, "Wow, 3 months, perfect timing." So I went out there to having no idea how to manage a comic book store, and I discovered American life and had all sorts of strange adventures, and I met my first wife. So I ended up staying in America for that reason, but that became my life. I've never returned to England to live for any length of time.
How long did you manage Outer Limits?
I managed it for longer than 3 months, probably 6 months.
Okay.
And then I got mono, which at my age, no, apparently you don't get mono when you're like 23 or whatever I was.
Mhm.
So, but I had mono, and that sort of kept me in LA, and I kept writing while I was sick. And then things just took off from there.
Yeah.
It was a different time. There were all this other. I did a lot of books too that never got published because companies were like going under and stuff. There was that Classics Illustrated run of comics. Remember
Yeah.
Sinkovich did that
Yeah.
beautiful Moby Dick.
Yeah.
And they hired me to do Faust, Goethe's Faust, which I adapted. And it was going to be drawn by Bernie Moreau.
Ooh, that would have been nice.
Would have been lovely.
Yeah.
And then when he dropped out, it was going to be the Panda Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to have fun. It was interesting because they said, we want you to play around with these classic stories and don't just adapt it. Do something fun. He says, an example would be The Wizard of Oz with the Tin Man as like a giant Coke machine. So you give that to the Panda Brothers, of course they're going to run with it. And they were told, "Oh, this is too crazy.
Mm-hmm.
No, you've got to like rein it in and just tell the story." So they completely contradicted themselves, and that kind of made the Panda Brothers go off and do whatever they did next, and that one died. So I have a lot of scripts. I've been thinking about getting a website up and putting all the stuff that never got published up. I'd be interested to see.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what I was going to say is I've always thought would be a great adaptation of Four Devils, One Hell would be the Teddy Christensen one, and then those 2 issues by Philip Bond.
Yeah.
To see two, equally talented artists telling the same script in the way they would tell it.
Yeah. And that's fascinating as well because they're very, very different artists.
Yeah.
Very different artists. Did it change the way that you wrote the back half of that series? Like once you started seeing what Teddy was giving you and how it was different from what Philip was giving you?
I wanna say yes, but if I'm trying to remember right, I was too young to know how to. That's a skill I learned on Starman, shaping a script to suit the artist's strengths.
Yeah.
And I don't think I quite had that. So I was just trying to write a good. I mean, I was working for Diana. Diana was a wonderful editor. I remember when the first script I did, it was all wrong and it was laid out wrong. And she wrote this script. It was like 3 pages of me going to her office, sitting down, and her explaining how to write a script. and the dialogue and the descriptions and the description of the rooms and everything else was her showing me how to write a comic script as a comic script.
Yeah.
So I think I was still learning how to do it
Sure.
at that time, and I think with like times past, the first one of those was Teddy Christensen actually that I did on Starman. I began to learn how to shape a story for the artist.
Yeah. Because that makes a huge difference in how the story unfolds.
It can, and also there are some, like, give an example where I didn't write for the artist as well as I could have. Was my first Legends of the Dark Knight with Tim Sale. Interesting sidebar was that when, because I've been, I know how Matt's world of Joe Matt and Tim Sale and all these different people that he knew. We all kind of Matt's guys. We all knew each other and would meet at conventions and go to dinner and stuff. So I knew Tim, and I suggested him for the first Legends of the Dark Knight I did. What was it called? Blades.
Yeah.
And Danny O'Neill said, so Archie was editing Legends of the Dark Knight. It was kind of outside of Batman continuity. But Denny still had a little bit of veto power of this or that aspect of it. And he said, there is no way that Tim Sale is a Batman artist. He can't do it. I won't let Tim Sale do Batman. And Archie, who was the nicest guy in comics, but when he wanted something, he was very, very like a bulldog. So he got Tim on the book, and obviously the rest is history.
Yeah.
Now, Tim Sale, just when he does a big panel, there is so much breadth in it. It's not wasted space.
Yeah.
And so I wish I had seen that earlier. To be fair, Jeff Loeb, when he did Challenges of the Unknown with him, also I don't think quite saw it. And then with the long Halloween or whatever it's called, you began to see just Tim opening up. And I wish I had. In fact, we were talking, Tim and I, when Classics Illustrated was still going, about doing the Speckled Band, Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, okay.
And I would have I'd love to see him do big, like Sherlock Holmes' study with all the details. It would have been beautiful. That was an example where I was still learning how to write to the strengths of an artist without compromising the story, which is also an important aspect of it.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean it's a developing process to learn how to write comics, and they do different things for different people. And one of the things we talk about a lot with creators that we interview is just sort of how time and space and the audience affects comics, right? Because you can do things in comics where you can leave it to the audience to define what's happening.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
the audience is in charge of it. Is in terms of a visual medium, because obviously if you're reading a novel, you can read it one word at a time. If you were that, well, you do it. Everyone reads them one word at a time, but you know what I mean. You could take 5 minutes between each word. But every other visual medium, the filmmaker, the animator, they dictate the time span of which any dramatic pause, the length, everything. In comics, it's up to you. It's up to the reader how long they want to give a panel and look at a panel. And some people, some people like what's interesting. Sorry, I'm thinking about things as we're talking.
Sure, of course.
Like I notice in manga, the Japanese, they read comics quickly. The manga, that's how they're meant to be read. But at the same time, I don't know his name. I've forgotten his name. But like the guy that did Lone Wolf and Cub, he would have those big panels which allowed people. It didn't allow them. It made them stop and look at the image for longer. So you can try and you can control how long someone looks at it, but only in comics can you do it with that much like nuance. I think.
Yeah, it's fascinating the difference between Japanese manga and American comics. It's the same word, manga and comics, that I think comes from the commuter culture, right? That in Japan, people are getting on the train at one end, buying the big 200-page manga anthology, and then when they get off the train on the other end, they're throwing it away, right? Yeah. Whereas in America, everybody who commutes, not everybody, but most people commute, get into a car and drive for an hour, and you can't read, you can't do things like that. I think that makes that's why they developed this thing of reading the manga fast.
Possible. I was going to say something, and the thought just left me.
Yeah.
It was about manga, and it'll come back to me.
Yeah. But the first thing that hit me when I read Lone Wolf was there was one of the earlier battles, and it was the two swordsmen against each other, but and there was just their eyes, right? And but then there was a leaf that was going slowly down the page, kind of back and forth as it cut back and forth between their eyes, and you could read it like literally that fast, right? But you could also go, oh, there's something going on with time here that it doesn't work in other media, as you say. That it's not even that; it's that especially with film and television, it's coming at you at 32 frames a second, and that there's no changing that.
No,
you can't. You could slow it down, but no one's going to slow down a movie to watch it. And also in comics, it's really, really common for me, at least, to I'm reading and then I'll go, wait a minute, hold on, let me go back 3 pages.
Yeah, that's true too.
Right, and I never do that in books or anything else, because time and space we're in control of it as the audience.
Yeah. So where did this start? So learning to write for artists, time.
Yeah. Like each one's a building block.
Yeah, and like even when you do like silent scenes, it's something you should think about. One thinks about when you're writing is you've really got to have an artist that can do a silent scene, and even then sometimes a silent scene with Batman. Or Batman would never. Now I'm being pedantic here. It's someone landing on a roof.
Yeah.
Silent scene, a burglar. And it's a bit of a long jump. So as he lands, he just goes, oof. Now that oof is not just there to show an oof. It's so you stop for a second, your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, people can read too quickly.
Yeah.
So there's ways to do like to manipulate time, which I think is fascinating.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But you need good artists.
Yeah.
People that understand what you're trying to do.
So when you're writing scripts, particularly now that you are a fully developed writer, are you thinking about those particular kinds of time things, and are you thinking about, say, the page turn and where it has to land and what that means?
Well, I definitely think about the page turn, but I also look at certain books that don't care about the page turn, but two of them are Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns.
I think Watchmen cares very much about the page turn.
I don't. Not always. There's stuff that happens on the right side.
There's but
big moments.
Yeah, there is.
Or like the owl ship coming out of the ocean. Classic scene. I used to own the original art for that.
Yeah.
There are 3 panels at the top of it.
Right.
But it isn't. He isn't as obsessed with it as I. When I was younger, I was like, there's always got to be a page turn and a thing at the top, which is from Hergé. Hergé's Tintin.
Yeah.
If you look at those, there's always a page. It's never double pages, but there's always something that starts at the top, goes to the bottom because it was done as singles, like Sundays.
Yeah.
So you wanted them to come back next issue, next week. So if you look at Watchmen, it isn't as page turny as you think, and then also like a lot of the action in The Dark Knight Returns is stuff that's happening on the right side with panels above it.
Sure.
It to me that's fascinating that you assume that it's always going to be page turns and all that, and those guys are like, we don't care, we're just telling a good story.
Yeah.
So as I've grown older, I still do it, but I'm a little less consumed by it. But it's so second nature to me that I tend to do it anyway, just because it's in my brain. Like I don't really need to. I always lay out a script in terms of the page, in terms of the page count and what happens. But there's a lot. Like I can write dialogue now. The way I work is I'll break down a comic into pages. Obviously, come up with the idea, then break down the comic into pages, and then I will write all the dialogue on paper.
Okay.
Which some people, Jeff Johns doesn't. He just goes straight into the computer. But I think when you write on paper, there's an organic. I'm getting a little bit arty here, but there's like an organic flow from your brain to your hand to the pen to the page that doesn't exist when you're typing. And then when you type that dialogue into the script on your computer, you're able to just do a little mini edit here, a little finesse of a word here, a little finesse there. But I can just look at dialogue and I know that's a page of dialogue. I don't need to break that down into panels in the way that when I was younger, I would have to really sort it out. And, when you're young, you learn this stuff. Diana taught me some of this. Like you was it 44? If you have a 9-panel page, the most dialogue you should put into it is 44 words,
Interesting. Okay.
and that's really pushing it. That's like Dave Gibbons level ability to put words in, and then you're not just allowing for the words, but the white space in the balloon around the words. So you've got to think about all that stuff as you're putting it in. Nowadays, that stuff is second nature to me after decades of writing.
Sure. Did you actually like do your own thumbnails to make sure that stuff flowed in the early days, or?
If I did, they weren't ones I showed the artist. There was sometimes
Sure.
I'd have an idea for a layout. The other thing that I discovered growing up, and then then Frank Miller came along and kind of it was Will Eisner's The Spirit, who was really, in hindsight, you do see these other, artists of the 40s and 50s who were experimenting with the narrative flow panel to panel, but nobody was really doing it the way that Eisner was doing it. In that, when he returned from the war and he took on The Spirit again, I mean, that stuff's amazing. And I found a lot of that Warren magazines. They had a black and white Spirit comic for a while, and then Dennis Kitchen took it over and continued the numbering. So that stuff was around. So I was kind of obsessed with panel by panel transitions. So I would sometimes try and explain that in the nicest, most unbossy, dictatorial way possible. And a lot of the time, artists would follow through. Some, they just did their own thing,
Sure.
I mean, Paul Smith, who I did The Golden Age with and Leave It to Chance, I would write, I guess I don't know if Marvel style they put all the dialogue in. Maybe they do now. But I would basically do what I said, like write all the dialogue and describe sequences, but with all of the dialogue. And then he would lay it out. And if you look at The Golden Age, there's stuff happening right side of the page, middle of the page, it's all over the place. He doesn't care about that. So that is that. So there were times when I would kind of do that and suggest stuff, but not very often. I was always trying to respect the fact that artists, we all have egos, and we don't like to be told what to do.
Sure.
So there was some.
I was asking more in terms of like you understanding better how the page flow worked by going, okay, well, here I'm laying it out. Well, I can move this panel over here and do that.
I would do that, but I would always translate that into the script. I wouldn't show people. What's interesting though, Archie, I would see his scripts, and he would do like just a little tiny thing with the shape of each panel. There was no little stickmen or anything. It was just how he saw the shape of the panel on the page for the artist. And I'm not really sure why he did that, because except he was telling the artist, this is how many panels you can fit on the page. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway. Interesting. Oh, that's interesting. So you've done an awful lot of things for an awful lot of companies. And I think the question I have here is that as a creator, your ability to control your own work is limited from what the publisher does with it at a certain point, right? And so I wonder about, I don't know if I'm going to frame this in the right way, like doing something like Chance, which was fully creator owned. You presumably still own the rights to it today.
Yes.
Not in print though at the minute.
Well, it's going to be at some point. So everybody's wanting to publish this, and Paul was just gone for decades. Yeah. But the very long suffering and patient Scott Dunbier tracked him down, and he signed a deal. I mean, they've announced an artist edition of X-Men, and then he's going, and I think at San Diego he announced Leave It to Chance is going to have an artist edition, and then he sort of got in the contract in the way that people can be clever with contracts. He's to do at some point a complete collection of Chance.
Okay.
With the idea that hopefully, because issues 14 and 15 are written, and there's layouts that it would finally get completely finished. Okay. So it's not in print at the moment. It hasn't been for decades.
Yeah.
But that, yes, Chance was, you were starting at something here.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, I was kind of thinking about the difference between Chance, say, and Golden Age, where I think Golden Ages is regarded as a classic story as well, but DC let that book go out of print for 10 years or more, probably, despite there being
Yes.
an audience for it. And then we could point to something like the Ultraverse stuff, where presumably you guys creator owned it, but then Malibu got sold and the rights got messed up. And I'm just wondering, because you have so much experience in that kind of.
Yes. Well, the comic books have changed in the time I have been writing them. So when it started, you do a book and then it goes out of print was just standard. And there was a guy at DC, I forget his name now, but he was. I never thought he had a very good idea of the long view of comics. So that was a bit of a problem with things like the Golden Age. It was Bob Wayne that actually, I think, got it back into print and championed it. He was always a good guy, but at the time it goes out of print. It just does. Now everything is collected, which is better. I mean, my friend who's in the audience and I were talking about Rom the Space Knight. I mean, that was out of print for 30, 40 years.
Sure.
So that was the thing, and then as more it gets collected, you find that those big companies, they have a budget or what they perceive as special. So I did a run of Fantastic Four, which I'm actually quite proud of. But that's been collected as three soft cover trades, or maybe four. But it's never been a nice omnibus or a nice hardcover, whereas other ones have been. So you have to be a little bit, what's the word? Water of a duck's back. You just have to accept that it's out of your control, and then when you own stuff, hopefully that will get, but again, if you own it, it has to find an audience. There has to be a reason, I
Sure.
mean, me and Jay Bone, who did to the Maynard, we did a series called Saviors for Image years before. And it was, I didn't really know how hard it was to do an Image book. It's like doing a Kickstarter. Image publishes it, and Image sometimes, depending on how high you are in the ranking in terms of creators, they'll give you something of an advance. But man, you're on your own after that. You've got to find if it's you and an artist, you've got to find a colorist, you've got to find an editor, letterer, all that stuff is, and then they come at you. When do you want to come out with the trade? And we but so things like doing a hardcover or something, it's even that can be taken out of your hands, even when you own the book.
Right.
And you can miscalculate. You can do a hardcover and no one buys it, and then you're stuck with. This happened to me actually with a book called Airboy that I did. It had a little bit of a rocky history, but we did a nice hardcover in the end, and I think I ended up like buying at cost 50 copies because it was they were about to junk it because they were moving warehouses.
Yeah.
So even when you're doing an independent book, you have to sometimes accept that things are out of your hands.
Yeah. And so from that point of view, I don't even know if this is the right question. Do you like working with bigger publishers who have more resources, or smaller companies where you've got to do more of the work yourself?
I think when I was younger, it definitely working for the big companies, because when you're younger and you're getting into comics, writing Batman or Superman or Spider-Man is exciting. As you get older, the challenge of doing your creation and getting it right and accepting that there's more work but there's more freedom becomes quite exhilarating. But again, you like we were talking before we started talking about how even when you're trying to do independent books or books you own for Boom or Oni or any of these companies, there are still compromises. I mean, they're businesses. They aren't. It isn't some altruistic organization that just lets you do what you want.
Yeah.
That the last one the only true version of that was Tundra years ago with Kevin Eastman.
Well, and so many people took advantage of that
They
too.
They did. Absolutely. Yeah. It was a crying shame, actually. So it's more of a challenge, but the end result is more satisfying, and you own it. So there's a sense of ownership.
Yeah.
as you get older, that's more appealing. But even now, I'm still talking to DC about things.
Mm-hmm.
So the desire for that kind of also the money. I mean, you have to pay rent.
Sure.
So that is more easy to get if you're working for Marvel or DC. When you
It's interesting because I thought currently,
yeah,
I thought the page rates have been frozen for like
Yeah.
a decade more or less.
it's still more money than often doing an image book or doing a book for
Right.
only.
Well, because on an image you're only getting money off the back end. You're not
Yes.
getting anything on the
Yeah,
front end
and you
for
might
the
not
most
get any
part.
money off the back end.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no, the page rates have been frozen for decades.
Mhm.
In fact, sometimes they want to. Oh, we're not paying that now, and you've got to think, really, you're not paying what I was paid 20 years ago. So that's just commerce. You have if you're willing to work for that much money, then it's still money.
Yeah.
I have yet to touch wood, become a greeter target, but I'm not dead yet, so you never know.
How about you worked on the Stargirl show?
I did.
I think the most recent Hollywood stuff that you've been doing is that
is the most recent
that came out at least.
The most recent Hollywood stuff I've been doing was the Stargirl, but I just wrote a script adaptation of London's Dark, first graphic novel I did for producers in England.
Nice.
England and Eastern Europe. There are lots of studios out there, which I will see where that goes. I'm currently in the course of rewriting and trying to get it to a point where everyone's happy with it.
Yeah. So the experience between doing comics where maybe you're not getting paid as much, but you have complete creative control, more or less, versus working in television and film where you're getting paid presumably significantly better,
good money,
but you've got to compromise in some fashion or another because there are so many people all around you.
Well, with that, my personal experience. So firstly, working at TV and film, you put it together. Everyone does that.
Yeah.
Very, very different.
Sure.
With TV, with film, I'll give you an example. Was I wrote League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and I wrote a really, really, really good script that got Connery interested in everything else. And then, right as it was beginning, oh my god, excuse me,
it's all good.
As we were beginning, Connery was there. We had the director. 9/11 happened, and too many of the aspects of the script I wrote could have played out in real life with more terrorist attacks. After 9/11, no one knew when the next one was going to happen, if there was going to be another one.
Sure.
So then, when I wrote that script, there was me and a creative executive. So I had a great deal of independence and free to do what the ideas. And I really did try and make something as close to Alan Moore's vision as I could. I took so long to describe the Nautilus, trying to capture every nuance of Kevin O'Neill's version, which was a brilliant version of the script, of the craft, of the vessel. So then, but then once Connery was on board, that movie was getting made. There was going to be a movie made. So suddenly, producers I didn't even know were on the movie were coming out of the woodwork, giving notes. It just changed and changed and changed, and it became this. And then the director also had I'm going to say he had a vision, but he didn't have a vision. He believed that he never read the comic. He never looked at the comic.
Wow.
So he had a vague idea of what it was about, and then he wanted to impose his vision on every aspect of it. So that's where you got this movie. My name is on it. I still get residuals sometimes, but it's a very imperfect thing. And because it was just me writing it, I got to feel all of that disappointment.
Yeah.
When you do a rewrite with producers or for whatever reason, sometimes you'll get good notes.
Yeah.
But sometimes, like, everybody thinks they can write. Everybody writes a shopping list. Everybody writes a letter to their mum, So everyone thinks they can write. No, people don't think they can be a cinematographer. Or they can, act like Al Pacino. Although God for Al Pacino, that's probably not the best example nowadays. Hoo-ha, or direct. People, but everybody thinks like, oh, I can change that script. I can change those lines. So sometimes you get good notes, but so often they're notes that you have to argue about and compromise on, and you kind of know you're hurting the script.
Yeah.
The amount of scripts I'm sure that had they been shot as originally written would be masterpieces that are things that we don't even remember or care about. It would probably be heartbreaking if we knew the statistic. But so that's one way of writing where you're constantly having to accept the beautiful baby that you gave birth to is slowly turning into a tattooed Hell's Angel,
Right.
thanks to these knuckleheads that have these positions in Hollywood. And often some love movies, but the amount of executives you meet that they don't even watch films. They just it's a job to pay for their wife's yoga classes.
Right. They like money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's that. The TV show I was on, firstly, Jeff Johns was the showrunner.
Yeah.
Jeff Johns, incredibly supportive, and he respected me, which obviously everyone likes to be respected. So very quickly, there's a position in film called in TV called the number two, and I used to joke sometimes doing it, you end up feeling like a piece of number two, but it's to kind of make sure that the showrunner kind of everything is kept the wheels are rolling around him. So it was a job I took to, and he definitely made sure I had that position. And when you're in the writers' room, you have to also run a room. So obviously, if he's there, he's running the room, which is taking ideas, putting them up, rearranging them. You have big, huge whiteboards all around the room, and you play with ideas, and you slowly refine the big idea into smaller ideas or smaller ideas until you get the episodes, and then eventually you allocate the episode to one writer or another from your team of writers, and they're the one that gets the credit. But really, so much of it has been the whole crew. There is it's almost the reverse of what I described in terms of the frustrations of all these producers, where instead you have all these writers and no one's in the room because they want to make a piece of shit. They're all there trying to give their best ideas. So, and there's just this enthusiasm when a show is working, and Stargirl was working, that just is infectious, and you enjoy going in. So it was a very good experience for me. I sometimes think about, like, there's one writer. This wouldn't be saying anything bad about him, but I'll leave his name off. There was a writer that kind of drifted into comics, and then he got out of comics and got into TV. And I think the first thing he did in TV was working for one of the medical dramas. I forget which one because there's so many.
Sure.
And I remember thinking to myself, man, if I had to write if I had to be in a room with a bunch of guys and all talking about medical dramas, and let's do an Alzheimer's episode, or let's do a cardiac arrest episode, I would be such a William Faulkner alcoholic writer, having to go into that every day. So I think obviously the show you do is probably makes it good or bad for a writer working on it. But TV for me was very, very exciting because there was such enthusiasm and an energy. And then you're on the set, and you're caught up in that too. And the writers have a lot. You bring in a director for each episode, but the writers are the ones that kind of have to keep that creative vision on track again.
Yeah.
And so that's exciting too.
Yeah.
So it was great. That was great.
Was this at all similar to any experiences with the Ultraverse? Because as I remember reading stories at the time, you guys did get into rooms together to try and build out the universe.
Well, no. Yeah, for me personally, probably no.
Okay.
So the Ultraverse, it's interesting you bring up the Ultraverse. It was a kind of an interesting building block in my career, but it's kind of been forgotten. So the Ultraverse, for anybody that doesn't know, was Malibu Comics' attempt to do their own line. And what they did...
This was just after Image. They had seen the money that they could make from Image, well, from Youngblood, I guess. And then Image formed, and they lost Youngblood and I think maybe Spawn before it had seen print. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, I didn't know that. Malibu was going to do
I
Spawn?
think that they were going to do... I think... They were going to do, well, maybe not Wildcats because Jim was still on X-Men at that point. But anyway, that's not neither here nor there.
So they formed it, and they decided to make it a writer's world. So they got a lot of the established people, Steve Englehart, what's his name? Oh, I forgot his name now. He's died. Gerber, Steve Gerber, great guy. James Hudnall, all these writers, and to put together this world that was loosely, the characters, were loosely a typical superhero world.
Yeah.
And they contacted me, the Blue, because I was this young up and comer, and they wanted one person to come in and do something that wasn't what people were expecting. So when I learned what the books were that they were doing, I wasn't blown away by it, because I felt that they were all derivative of characters. Like even Steve Gerber, God bless him, he did Sludge, which was very much his original take on Man Thing, which he had obviously done all this amazing work on and didn't. So it was an attempt to kind of get his own version. Steve Englehart did kind of the X-Men. They were all kind of like something or other. So I came up with. I deliberately was like, I don't want to do any of that. I don't know who I'd want to imitate. So I came up with this private detective in a world of ultras, of superheroes. And I made him a British expat who lived in Pasadena. I lived in Sierra Madre, which is a little town right near Pasadena. I really kind of tried to give it as much of a autobiographical feel as I could, to make it feel real and different from everything else. And people did respond to it. It was me and Cully Hamner working together for the first time. Various other aspects of it that I enjoyed very much. But the thing about it was that the reason why these books are gone and they'll never be reprinted is that the deal for the writer in terms of ownership was so good. Like, it was so good that had Len Wein gotten that deal for Wolverine, he'd be a multi-millionaire, like probably a billionaire. So eventually, Scott Rosenberg, who owned Malibu, kind of screwed all the people that were working on the Ultra, who were the ones that really put it together and made it into something. Sold it to Marvel, and Marvel bought the Ultraverse for the market share. They had no interest in those characters. So there was a little bit of a crossover when they bought them, and certain characters met certain characters.
The thing I remember was that Marvel, at least it was rumored at the time, bought Malibu for the digital coloring, because Malibu had the best or only developed digital coloring at the time. And that's one of the reasons they kind of shunted the properties that they bought off to the side, because they just wanted the coloring to
I've heard that too.
Yeah.
I've heard that too, actually, but I still think part of it was market share.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, because I remember that at the time. So basically, if they and we were kind of told this when it happened, that Marvel were never going to publish those characters in their own comics, because the contractual deal was so in favor of the writer that it would open a potential precedent lawsuit for people that wanted to sue Marvel, like Len Wein or whoever, Chris Claremont, to own a piece of all these characters that have made Marvel millions. So that was why the Ultraverse has gone away. But I did 18 issues, and I sort of ended it in a way that I was very satisfied with.
Yeah.
And then it was time for me to move on. And I think around about then I must have kind of felt the writing on the wall, because I did think the quality of the book started to kind of go down anyway.
I did love Firearm, though. That was my favorite of those the whole line. Yeah, that was a swell comic. Cool. Let me pause here and just go. Denny, y'all have questions for
please.
James? I'd love to take a couple if you have one. Nobody does.
On.
Nobody has anything.
Yeah, I have one. It's kind of about anything we've been talking about, but
please.
It's more about Nash from Starman.
Yes.
That's a complicated character, very desperate, very, very evil, but just wanting to be loved.
Yes.
Was there a particular thing in your life that you channeled her? Because when I read her, she's just so intense to me, and there's this fiery emotion that I get when I read it.
Yes, I mean, I've always tried to bring elements of my own life into comics, and obviously everybody sort of tries to do that. But I think in comics sometimes, when I talk to other creators, they're kind of scared to put themselves on the page. So Nash was So I had a very complicated relationship with my mother. She wasn't really mentally all there. So there were aspects of growing up that where I had to raise myself and kind of find love, and she was represented some of that, definitely, and she also represented the idea of like when you do everything you're supposed to do, you're still rejected, and it was she was there as a counter to Jack, who deliberately, from the first moment I wrote Starman, I said Jack will never tell his father he loves him until it's too late at the end when Ted Knight dies. So it was like Ted Knight would be happy if Jack did anything. He just loved his son. And she was the counter to that. And when I was growing up, I had a little bit of a speech impediment for a few years when I was a kid. So that the stutter and the fact that she had that stutter and then it came and went to reflect her feelings with her father. Well, I'm glad you like the character. Even you bring up in a question, it's not something I don't think I've ever been asked a Nash question. But if you resonate with that character and maybe some aspects of how you were brought up with your parents, I hope that Jack at least gave you some pleasant closure or some pleasant experience in the same way.
He sure did.
Good. What's your name, sir?
My name is Clay.
Craig?
Clay.
Clay, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Nice. Please.
Yeah, one thing I always loved about your work is there's a kind of romanticized voice that I get from your work, and I don't mean romantic just to like I love you, but also just like things feel bigger than life. They feel bigger somehow.
Well, that's a lovely thing to say to a writer. No, it's lovely.
But I love that, and I just was like, and I was curious, was it a conscious decision? It's just like the way that you see the world. It's just like there's like. He means where you go.
Well, I have to say it's a question that I would be suspicious of anybody that could answer that question, because it's not an aspect of my writing. I kind of almost see what you mean, but it's not like a premeditated thing. It's just within me. And I think if someone was to say yes, I would go, really? You I don't think you are consciously writing that way. Howard Chaykin, years ago, I've just started sort of talking to Howard again, but years ago he accused me in a joking way that he said you have too many people falling in love at first sight, and he's probably right, but I've never shied away from that. To me, that is like epic drama. Romeo and Juliet. We everybody loves that story. That's love at first sight. But I was, I told him recently. I reminded him of this. And I said that my latest wife number 3, my final wife, I met at a nightclub. She was outside smoking a cigarette, and I went over and I saw she was pulling a cigarette out of her purse, and I walked over to her and said, "Can I light your cigarette?" And we've been married for 10 years. So love at first sight can happen. So I think what I would say to you is that I when I can, I try and write for what I think is the best in ourselves, in humanity, and in our hearts. I'll give you an example of someone who seems to enjoy not doing that so much. Brilliant writer, but Warren Ellis. In Warren Ellis' books, everybody smokes, God's bored or dead, and everybody has this cynical look at life, and that's fine, but it's not the kind of stories that I like to write. In fact, I did a series. I did a little bit of work for Marvel a few years back. I told you I wrote Fantastic Four, which I'm proud of. Scarlet Witch, also very proud of that, and a book called Nick Fury, which I did was my love letter to Jim Steranko. I also did Squadron Supreme, and the way it was pitched to me by what's his name, Tom Brevoort, he said, "Hey, do you fancy like sticking it to DC?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, we want to do like a version of the Justice League where they have what's the term, where you'll kill 100 people in order to save 1,000 people. There's a term for that, and I can't quite remember what it is.
The trolley problem, more or less.
What's that?
The trolley problem, more or less.
Well, I guess that's not a term I've heard either. So,
okay,
but you know what I mean." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess I'll try and do that." This bunch that goes in and kills the villains, that are going to destroy the planet, but they kill a bunch of humans. And then very quickly, I was like, "I can't do this. I'm still writing a version of Superman and a version of, the Flash, and it was too hard for me to take that kind of cynical worldview. I always want to try and write stuff that where people, we all hopefully we want to do good and be kind. People aren't kind. People are, but often in comics and in writing, people are afraid to make people kind. And I think that's a shame. I think that that's something that you can bring to a story and make it a better story for it, not make it a sappy story, a saccharine story.
Do you think that some of that comes from you cutting your teeth on superheroes more or less with the Justice Society characters, and just how innately hopeful they have to be because of the background of World War II? If that makes sense as a question?
No, it makes sense. I'm trying to think if I'm trying to think of the answer in terms of. I suppose so. With the Golden Age, what I wanted to do with the Golden Age was at the time, in terms of what those characters at DC, they had been sent to Valhalla.
Yeah.
And they were fighting as guardian or ice giants or something for eternity. And I remember thinking that, man, that's a sort of weirdly sad fate for these guys. So I wanted to give them a send-off that had the maturity of writing that I had been inspired by with Batman Year One and Alan Moore and Howard Chaykin and Matt Wagner. But I wanted to give them sort of a happy ending or a glorious ending. Mm-hmm. Obviously the witch hunts and McCarthy made them go away from society. This is all DC continuity. But so I wanted to give them that one last sterling moment, and ultimately it was, killing Hitler. Finally, they get to kill Hitler. So I think you're right. I mean, you often it's easy to put intentions in hindsight 20, 30, 40 years later to try and make yourself look good by agreeing to some intelligent question, when at the time, if I did it, I think it was probably more instinctual. I just wanted to give them a glorious positive send-off.
Sure.
Yeah,
And
even in there, obviously you got to have some people flawed and have, it broke my heart to make Robot Man a villain and these various characters, but I hope I gave optimism and hope at the same time.
Very much.
By the way, I recognize you from Instagram. You have a very familiar face. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions from the audience?
A question. I just wanted to know, how did the idea for Welcome to the Maynard come about? I mean, you have it set in San Francisco. Was it you wanted to do a San Francisco story, or did that come later?
Well, okay. So I had the beginning of an idea of this hotel, this magical hotel. And I wanted to make it because I knew it'd have themes and a feeling that was very much not Harry Potter. But the moment you mention like a magical place living under normal world and no one knows it's there, you immediately think about Harry Potter and the train and all of that sort of thing, or maybe like C.S. Lewis and Narnia and things like that. So I wanted to set it in a city. I lived in San Francisco at the time, and it just sort of made sense to me. If I was a magician and there was a hotel, I was where I want my hotel, it would be either San Francisco, New Orleans, or maybe Manhattan, but not really. To me, it would be San Francisco or New Orleans. And if you've been to New Orleans, it is so. I found it personally to be such a racist town, surprisingly, considering the birthplace of jazz and all this sort of thing. That the idea of setting something there, I just couldn't do it. So it was where I live, San Francisco, and it just suited it. And like Pip, she's this bright, energetic soul. She has she's the mystery of her mother, and her mother, which is stuff you'll learn down the line. But obviously, she has secrets and she has mystery. But I felt this city suited her. She's gay, obviously. That this city just suited her. It suited the feel of this hotel and the idea that it was, south of Mission in an alleyway, and yet really it's this amazing hotel. So that was part of it. And then the name came about, funnily enough. I'm not going to say what movie, because I might turn this into like a little contest one day, but I misheard a supporting character in a Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers musical comedy, say what I thought was Welcome to the Maynard. And I remember thinking, my God, that's the magical hotel name. And then when I rewatched it, because I couldn't remember which one of the Fred Astaire movies I watched, so I watched a couple, and I'm like, oh, there it is. He doesn't say that. He says something else. So that was a lucky happenstance. But I mean, this is the city for a magical hotel, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
No, I think so. I think so as well. Well, that's good that you drew the conversation back to that to the book, because that was the next thing that I was going to do as we go in here to the, because we got like
No.
maybe a half an
Oh,
hour
you gotta
before
open
we have to open up.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's an origin of the story. Were you so you came out with 4 different miniseries, or the 4th one's coming out this week. Maynard, Patra, Los Monstros.
Los Monstros. That's the Spanish spelling. One of alternate cover artists who I've worked with. I worship the guy, Marcus Martin, and he's like, "You're spelling it wrong. No, if it's you've got to spell it right." So we changed the spelling to make Marcus happy.
Yeah. And then The Adventures of Lumen N.
Lumen N, yes.
Yeah, which looks really good. I haven't read it yet, but it looks really nice.
I mean, they all have. They're very. You said to me yesterday that one of maybe the problems with the books I've done for Dark Horse is they didn't really release them in a way that was like, this is the varied imagination of James Robinson, because they're all 4 books are very, very different, and I think that in hindsight you're right, but they are all very different. The first one, Patra, was actually a germ of an idea by Scott Collins, and then I kind of added and made it to our idea, and he was eager to go. That was the first one out the gate, and then Maynard was the second, and it didn't take that long to do, only because Jay is very, very fast. And I think he's one of the most. I mean, people admire his work, but at the same time, there are artists that are still deserving of more recognition, and he's definitely falls into that camp. I think the work he does is fantastic.
Yeah. He's a spectacular cartoonist.
But he's very inspired by European comics, Spiro, Asterix, Tintin, the stuff that they have these comics in bande dessinée in Europe that have a more cartoony style, but there's still mysteries and there's still life and death moments as well as humor. And we both wanted to do that with Maynard, and I think he did a pretty great job.
I agree. So were you always sort of intending to publish them all at the same time, or did it just work out that way?
Well,
or
it was and is a little bit frustrating, because Dark Horse I don't know if it's their editorial policy or their finances, but they said to me that if a book comes out by a creator with another book coming out at the same time or overlapping, it can hurt the sales of them. They can kind of cannibalize each other's sales.
That is true.
Is that true?
That is potentially true, yeah.
So, see, because I look at like Jeff's stuff with the Ghost Machine, and those books are coming out all the time, and they don't cannibalize sales. You know, maybe it's just his name is big enough that he can do that. But
yeah, we could.
There's a whole
sidebar there, yeah. Okay.
But they released them one at a time, so it took a long time for these books to come out, and at times it was frustrating. You know, with a book, 4 issues done and waiting to go, which was the case with Los Monstros.
Okay.
So it was, and they never really announced like this is James Robinson's little group of books. They were just sort of put out there. So I don't know that people were always aware of it. I mean, in fact, I know that a lot of people, Welcome to the Maynard, they don't even, and Patra, they don't even know the book is out there and exists.
In Patra's case in particular, I think the biggest mistake they made, especially because it was the launch book of the thing, was the logo was down on the bottom of the page, on the bottom of the cover, and your name was under the logo rather than up on the top. And it didn't say James Robinson, it just said Robinson. And there's like 18 different Robinsons who write comic books.
It's as you say that. So first of all, I will throw him under the bus. That's all Scott Collins. He designed that cover, and especially with creator-owned stuff where you have to like allow people to do what they want to a degree. And I didn't notice it. The minute you say all that, I'm like, God, Brian's right. My gut just kind of twisted a little bit.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right. It's a good thing to, even in hindsight, it's sometimes good to for the next time. So all of that's true, and there's nothing. I mean, the water has very much gone under the bridge, so not much I can do about it. Yeah, that was the first book.
Was the intention that they were all going to come out at roughly the same time, though? Was that your thought originally?
Well, I don't know that I thought they were all going to come out at the same time, but I didn't think there would be this long, 4 issues, and then have to wait for another 4 issues. I thought there'd be some transitionary, issue 3 comes out, and the first issue of the next series comes out.
Right.
And I guess I should have personally kind of got out there more and made it known that these books were all going to be so different. One is, a monster book, or a slasher monster book, although it in the end, the character, there's more to the character than you first think. Then this Maynard, and then Los Monsters is a private detective book with monsters, and then there's steampunk adventure with Lumineer. I wish I had made it clear that it was like sort of the 4 corners of my imagination.
Yeah.
But again, water under the bridge.
Yeah. Are there intentions to move forward with the 4 or some of them, or?
Well, my intention is to move forward with all of them.
Yeah.
And luckily, the artists are all of the art. Well, Phil Hester, I think that book, we'll see how that does. But the artists are all very much into these books. So it's working out the best way to go to that next stage. We were talking about Where Monsters Lie, how the artist, the writer of that has done the 3rd as a Kickstarter. And I don't know if ultimately that's to get the book, to pay for the book to be done, and then Dark Horse will release it, or how that's going to work. And I need to find out about that.
Yeah.
But, one way or another, there'll be more Patra and there'll be more Maynard. In fact, Maynard, I've written the next, it's like an annual. The next full arc of Maynard will be a magical whodunit that kind of takes place simultaneously in our Maynard, and then also the Maynard in Kyoto, in Japan. I figured it would be like the Hilton, where you have different Hiltons in the world. Sure. So there are 4 or 5 of these magic hotels around the world in interesting cities, Leningrad and Kyoto and places like that. So that's the next one. But in between, I'm doing an annual, or a 36-page story, which is all of the characters in the book, their lives on one particular day, when they're not all. It's like the day off for most of them, so you see what their lives are like outside of it. And again, it will everybody will surprise you. And at the same time, for people who haven't read the book, there's a griffin at the end of the book. Is that a griffin or a phoenix? I should know, shouldn't I?
You should know. It's a griffin.
It's a griffin. I thought so.
Yeah, that's a griffin.
And then and she has had her feathers ruffled by all the events that take place at the end. So Margot, the manager, takes her out to have pastries and tea at a nice restaurant, and she bumps into her sort of arcane rival, who is she's also, when she's out in the real world, she looks like this overdressed, like old, lady from like Gigi or something, from 100 years ago. And she bumps into one of her rivals who's also in her human form, and they have a huge magical battle that no one can see. And meanwhile, you get all the other characters and what they're up to, and you see Pip and Raylene, and they're trying to learn magic, and there's misadventure. So it's sort of fun, and it will lead into this whodunit, which will be the next arc.
Nice.
So I've written that script, and Jay has laid out most of it. I mean, he's ready to draw it. So these things are taking shape. I'm working on a Patra story now. Again, it will be an annual 36 pages, 48. That is Patra meeting the next of those, my version of these slasher characters. So it will be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre family, a version of them that she has to meet and deal with, and that will be another story. I'm actually doing a convention in Memphis, and Scott will be there. So I'll have, and that's in like 3 weeks. So I'll have the script by then.
Nice.
So these things are all continuing. It's just that we'll see how they are in terms of Dark Horse's involvement.
Sure. Sure. It's creator owned, so you could take it somewhere else if you needed to?
I think yes. Well, yes. I think if they had sold better,
Mm.
Dark Horse might have an opinion on the matter. But I think they're just happy to let me keep these things going, much as Where Monsters Lie.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah. I did what I could in buying 200 copies of this book for the club. So,
200 copies. Oh
yeah,
God. Okay.
we're probably the number one store.
That's fantastic.
Is my guess. You know.
Well, the book plate, which isn't here but will be for anybody that's bought the trade, just got to be patient. It should take about 2 weeks, I think, and then you'll get the book plate.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. Oh, do you have any more to ask about that?
Yeah. Well, yes.
Because one of the things that I wanted to point out, I said something earlier. What is your name, by the way?
Dan.
What? Den. Den. What Den? Something that spun off what Den said is that I wanted the book in the end to be about forgiveness and love and kindness. And there's still danger and there's still all this stuff going on,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't want sort of vengeance and punishment.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a sense of hope at the end of it. You know, so I don't want to, spoil things for people watching this that haven't read the graphic novel, but I think that it has this. And Jay kind of knew what I was doing, but he didn't quite get it until he read the script, and then he was like, "Oh my God, this is such a different feel at the end of this book than so many other books where there's always sort of a darkness or a punishment or something, and there's a little bit of a sad element to Pip, but." Her situation, but even her at the end. I mean, there's love. She's surrounded by people, her friends, and I sometimes miss that in comics, and I'm glad I haven't got it to put in that one.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like the tone of it so much, and I like the whimsy of it as well.
Yes.
I guess that's kind of the nature of magical stories in a way.
Well, it can be. I mean, not all magical. My wife is a big fantasy reader. There's a lot of dark magic books.
Sure.
A lot of, but not this one. And I think a lot of that lies with Jay. Hopefully I inspired him, but he then inspired me back. I don't quite know what I imagined. This is something that can happen. This happened in Lost Monsters too, where Jesus is like, I need more monsters. There's a double page spread in Lost Monsters with all the monsters in the street, and it took him forever because he had to keep thinking of monsters. And I don't think I realized with Maynard how if you go, all the guests are arriving or there's people are checking in, and Jay's like, well, do they look like just people? That's not very magical. It's not very interesting. So he was the one that started to inject more and more of these fantasy characters than I would suggest. Well, what about this? And someone's coming in on a flying carpet, or someone's coming in. I remember I came up with the giant. Was it a rock? The ROK, the magical bird, and there's a saddle on it, like a sedan chair, like for an elephant. Or I likened it in the script to the sardine can that the mice are sitting in with the seagull in The Rescuers.
Yeah.
Do you remember that Disney movie?
I do, yeah.
And I likened it to that, so we constantly kind of outdo each other with different fantastic characters. And then there was a scene where she's like pushing by some older ladies, magical like witches, and he came up with all their names, and he's like, yeah, and they go on shopping expeditions in San Francisco when they get together, and they're always hanging out, and they blah 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 blah. And he turned it into this whole sort of little sub idea, and that was a real joy of working on the book. Was working with Jay. I mean, always working with Jay is great because there's always some aspect of the page that you don't expect to see that makes it even better. But the like bringing that whimsy, it's a really good word to use to all the guests and the feel of it, and not being afraid. The assistant manager with his ridiculously long nose, not being afraid to inject that into a book and think it's going to make the book look goofy,
Yeah.
but it doesn't. It makes the book charming.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was definitely something I felt. Again, it's I do feel this is a very unique book,
I agree.
and I'm proud of it in that way, especially when you get to my age. Coming up with things that feel fresh is something you can take pride in.
Yeah. At what point did Jay get involved? I mean, you didn't write it for him specifically initially, I'm assuming.
No, I had the idea in mind. I mean, I did. This is the same with all of them. I have like I have a couple more ideas still in the bank, but I was like, hey, I really, you want to work with me again? These are the ideas. And there was this idea and another idea, and he was sort of between the two, and then this was the one that resounded with him the most. The same with Seuss and Lost Monsters, and then definitely with Phil Hester and Lumen. I had a couple of ideas, and they kind of chose this one or that one.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how much of it was kind of real? I think it was at the time that Jay got involved. It was the hotel. There was a bellhop that was going to train to be the house detective. That was it.
It was it. Okay.
And everything else, as Margot. Just one day, I was describing this, elegant woman and blah blah blah. And then one day there was Margot. That was Jay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this book is very much. I mean, they all are true collaborations or partnerships, but this one, working with Jay on this is great. He texted me, wished me good luck today for this, and we'll be talking, next week about continuing the 36-pager.
Nice. I love the notion too that you have an idea and then the idea becomes real once you have your collaborator there. Because certainly I've spoken to many writers who are like, oh no, I had it all. It was all figured out ahead of time, and I knew what was going on, and then I went to try to find the right artist for the book.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that wouldn't happen in the future.
Sure.
But it didn't with these. The other one, I should mention this for people. I had a Kickstarter, a series called Rogue's Kingdom. I don't know did anybody back this book? Anybody know? No, nobody knew about it. God, getting the word out on Kickstarters is so hard. Mm-hmm. So I've done this series. The first issue has it met its goal, and we got it out. The second one has met its goal. We're about to get that one printed, and it's a fantasy series with art by Jeff Johnson, and it's just utterly gorgeous. And I hope if you look it up, I think you can hop on and pick it up in as a late edition. So Rose Kingdom, and again, it was one that he and I talked about wanting to do something together. We originally tried to do it for Image, but the way that Jeff works, he just works too slow. So that in order to pay, so whatever advance Image would offer isn't enough to sustain him for the amount of time it takes him to do the book. 3 months, it's not like a huge amount of time, but it's enough. And then, but we first bonded on the idea of a love of the 1970s 3 and 4 Musketeer movies, which for anybody that hasn't seen them, they are fantastic. They were done by Richard Lester, who did Hard Day's Night and Superman 2, among other movies, and Help, actually, the 2 Beatles movies. And they are just these rollicking, beautifully shot 3 Musketeer movies filmed in Spain, where they still have rotting castles and all this stuff where they can make you look real, but at least in the 1970s. And the design of the clothing and everything else. And Jeff was like, if I could do this and just put all this time into the costumes and the swords and all of that, and he did. And then we added in dragons and werelings and all that stuff too, because it's a comic. So that's something else that I consider that like the 5th book of the 4, but because of one reason or another, it's a Kickstarter. So hopefully, eventually, that will be finished, and then it will be a collection, and maybe you guys can check it out then. But I would prefer that you get on board with the Kickstarter.
Yeah, you got to pay for the production somehow. Yes. Yeah, that's cool. When you pitched these to publishers, instead of assuming that it was only Dark Horse, was Jay involved? Were all the teams put together at that point, or were you still like? No,
they were all. Actually, if I'm honest with you, they were all. It was only Dark Horse.
Okay.
The Dark Horse. I do wish they had a better kind of machine for getting the word out about stuff, but the deal they offer for creators in terms of retaining the IP and all of that is very, very favorable. Mm-hmm. So it was an easy decision to go to them, and I had sort of been introduced via email, thanks to Jeff Lemire, with Daniel Chabon,
Mm-hmm.
who is actually Michael Chabon's half brother, and he's the main editor. He seems to edit almost everything there. It was very easy to make contact with him and talk to him. So bringing the ideas to him with those creators, he's like, yeah, that sounds great. He got them approved. So it was only really Dark Horse. And yes, the artists came with me. It wasn't that we had the idea and then we found the artist afterwards. You know, but we had to find the alternate cover artists. That's the only thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't care about that stuff. Alternate covers, man. How long did it take kind of from pitch to publication for these to...
Well, there was always, as I said, there could be a wait between between a book being finished and being published based
Sure.
on the fact of another one.
But putting aside that part of it.
Not long.
Okay.
You know, they give you a schedule. Dark Horse gives you a schedule that is generous for the creator because they don't want, you know how it is. 2 issues come out, and then people have to wait 4 months for the third issue. But all of the artists were, you know, fast, professional. They understood how important that was. So there was never any problem. There hasn't been any problems at all. You know, that aspect of it, working with Daniel Chabon and Chuck is like, he wanted as assistant, but I think he's like co-editor. Very, very smooth, very enjoyable time.
Yeah. And I've heard from a couple other people that Daniel's, you know, his script notes, because you were talking about notes before, were actually generally really helpful and made a better comic at the end. Does that match to your experience as well?
No, and not in a bad way. I sometimes wish I had had a few more notes. Maybe he didn't find that much fault with what I did, but in many ways he was more a facilitator than one of these editors that wants to, you know, roll up his sleeves and get into story points with you.
Right.
Which if you have the right editors, great, but often that can be frustrating depending on who you get.
Yeah.
No, but you know, everything he had always had really good insights and a pleasure, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's strong enough material. It probably doesn't need a lot of notes. And how long, if at least from your side, did it take Jay to draw it? Was he drawing an issue a month? Was that what was happening, or a little more, a little less?
No. I'd have to. If it was more than a month, it was 5 weeks. It wasn't a huge wait. You know, the same with Jesus. I mean, they were all. I mean, Scott Collins is a demon. He like penciled, inked, and colored it. He's just a fast artist.
Yeah. Speaking of color, there's a pretty interesting palette in a lot of places.
Well, there was a colorist on the book, but Jay had a lot of input into the color.
Okay.
And I mean, Jay is an all-round a very talented guy.
Yeah.
You know, obviously. So and you know, but there are some beautiful tones there. The purples, the greens. They're the kind of tones. I was talking to a friend yesterday. There's a lot of Kevin Nolan tones.
Yeah.
Those purples and those lime greens and things that you don't see normally because people don't know how to do them right. But they're done right there.
Do you think as the series goes on that you will continue to focus on the magical world of it, or do you think there will be more of San Francisco's character coming through?
Well, I think I have it's not a hard thing to do, but I have to always maintain a balance between the two, because if it's all magic, it might as well be in Johannesburg or London.
Sure.
It could be anywhere, or Detroit. But if it's just about the characters in San Francisco, then that isn't the Maynard either.
Yeah.
So I do think that the story that we're just about to do, the sort of semi-day off adventure in San Francisco, is a perfect example of giving more of San Francisco to the book.
Yeah.
And then with the locked room mystery that will follow, the Maynard will be more of a feature. So I think we're going to go back and forth.
The only reason I ask is because I find that San Francisco has changed so dramatically over the last decade.
I try and mention that in the book.
Yeah.
You know, how it's when I lived in San Francisco, I came up here from LA, and it was the tail end of like what I thought was cool San Francisco. There were still all these cool bars. There was a Tintin store.
Yeah.
There were secondhand bookstores everywhere. And while I was in San Francisco for 6 years, I think I saw these stores slowly close. You know, people would move in above a bar and then sue the bar for keeping them awake, and all
Yep.
this kind of stuff to erode these things, and also obviously kicking out all the people that have lived in the place for 40 years. They get kicked out so the place can get torn down and a block of flats goes up.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible change in the city. So if you mean, will I be showing the rise and fall, or hopefully the rise of the city again, or the changes to it? I think I would have to be inevitable. Yeah. And try and do it accurately.
Yeah, because I think particularly in terms of, which is the funny thing about having a magic hotel in San Francisco, is like it's all tech now. Tech is the thing that has changed the city, like all for the worse.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
all these people who just have far too much money and make it so that you can't be an artist in San Francisco anymore. You can't be a dreamer anymore.
No.
You have to be hard pragmatist and money. And you know, it's the big change to me in the city that you there's no artists living here any longer, right?
No,
they all moved to Oakland, and then they couldn't afford to live in Oakland either, and then they moved to like whatever the next two towns, and then they moved away.
Yeah.
You know, and
I live in Vegas now, and there's lots of artists there that have moved from California.
Yeah,
because there's space too.
Yeah.
You know, if you can for the price of, you know, you could get a place twice this size as a studio for a fraction of the money.
Yeah. It's an interesting world. Well, all right. What have I not asked you about the book? That is there something that you thought that I can't wait to see how people react to this particular thing?
Not really.
Yeah.
I think I got everything. I think you did. I also, another thing I was quite proud of was the B plot of the magician who wants to end his life.
Yeah.
And the fact that Pip says, you know, there's always hope. There's always something to live for. And, you know, suicide is a serious thing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to also try, you know, want a little bit of the life is, there's always tomorrow could be the big moment where things change.
Yeah.
You know, so I was quite proud of that.
Yeah.
And has everyone here read this? Yeah. Okay. Well, it's if you haven't, I think you will enjoy it. And you know, you asked the question, Clay, about Nash. Some of the emotions that run through her, I think, at times run through some of this, and you might enjoy this too.
Nice. All right. Well, then to wrap it up,
Yes.
much like the first question, the last question is the same in every show. This is a series of interviews. We do 2 a month for 10 years now. So there's 200 plus 250. I don't know. There's a lot. And so there are a lot of people who follow this who are interested in careers in comics themselves. And one of the things that I quite often hear from people is, you know, I really would love to make comics, but I'm not confident in my ability. You know, I'm not good enough. I don't know if I can do it. And so the question is, if there was a piece of advice that you were to give someone who wants to be in comics, what might that advice be? It can be something physical and practical. It could be something sort of emotional. It can be something, I don't know, spiritual. No one's given me a spiritual one yet. But however you'd like to answer that, what would be the thing that you would suggest to someone?
Well, what I would suggest, I mean, if you want to get into comics, so firstly, I would say look at comics and what are the stories you want to tell, and are those stories comic stories, or are they perhaps prose stories? I mean, make sure that you're committing to the right medium, and then, you know, some people want to be writers and they can't write. They're just not writers. They don't have that gene. But if you do, then you just got to believe in yourself. I mean, there's no answer to lack of confidence. You have to find your confidence, and that's the same with all art, acting, architecture. You know, every day you wake up, thinking, God, shit, I've got to do better this time. You know, Scorsese. I was saying the other day, he still thinks he's shit. He's still trying to make the best make that good movie, you know. So you just have to work through that. I will say that if you want to get into comics, the obvious ways are you get a job, you know, as the intern at a comic book company if you can. And hey, sir, thank you very much.
Thank you. This was really great.
Thanks. One way is to get in so you understand comics, you understand what comics are looking for, and slowly you can begin a career. Peter Tomasi did that, among many. But the other thing is just either find an artist, even if they have a very alternate or crude style, work together, come up with ideas, or even try and do it yourself. Just like learn how to write comic books. Don't if you go to an editor, don't give them like an outline. They'll never read it. They'll never have the time to read it. So come up with what are they called? The little not fan comics. What are they called? You know, zines. Do a zine. Do something that shows you can tell a story. But mainly, you know, comics are a special medium. They are unique. And if you love that medium and you believe you can contribute to that medium, then just you have to believe in yourself and not give up on yourself.
Yeah.
That's all I like to say.
Yeah.
And if you have a faith of any kind, you know, say a little prayer to yourself that it'll all happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Very much so.
Spiritual. There you go.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Dude, thank you for the time today. I think this has been a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me do a little business. Let me turn to the camera and just do a little business, and then we'll wrap it up. So first off, if you're sitting at home there, I hope everything's going well with you. Things are rough these days. And you know, when the world's crappy and full of stress and all of these things, reading something that's fun and joyful and magical and whimsical is always a great choice to do. So I very strongly recommend that you buy a copy of Welcome to the Maynard. You can, on this video, there's a place that you can click. You'll be able to buy it from us if you wanted to. It will come with the signed book plate once we get the book plates by both Jay Bone and James Robinson. So that's really cool. But you don't have to buy it from us. Get it from your local comic shop. Heck, get it from the library. Go check out a copy. That counts too. You're really going to like it, and we strongly recommend this. I'd like to make a couple of thank yous here. First and foremost, I want to thank my producer, Jordan. He does a bunch of stuff that no one else sees, but I wouldn't be able to do this at all without him. I want to thank Ben for running the show today and setting up the cameras and doing all the work. I want to thank my staff. I've got the best staff of a comic shop. Kat and Katie and Chrissy and Kipling, they all have cuss sounds in their names. It's the funniest thing. And Max too, which has a cuss sound at the end, Max. But yes, and they're the greatest people who work at a comic shop. I would not be able to sit here and interview artists if it wasn't for them, you know, doing great things running the store. I want to thank everybody who is subscribed to this series. You can subscribe if you haven't already. We do, as I say, 2 of these every single month. We talk to great people. We introduce you to great books. And if you've got the money, please join the club, because we will actually send you these books and you can read them before we do the interviews. And that's really cool. It also helps keep our store alive. This is literally our fundraiser as an ongoing thing. So any support you can do, we want to thank you very much. And most of all, though, I have to thank the creators who make comics, much like James Robinson right here, because if it wasn't for you, I would be sitting in a store full of blank pages. And I much prefer having a store full of dreams and imagination and wonder. That would not happen without you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right on. Thank you very much. All right. We'll see you all next. Oh, wait, hold on. I forgot the last part. The last part is the next couple shows. Next month, I'm talking to Tom Scioli. I think I pronounced that right. Who did Space Opera Xanadex here. This is a cool comic, man. And it's like Jack Kirby today. This is an awesome piece of work. That's the next adult club. And then the next month's kids club, I'm talking to Laura Terry, who did this book called The Adorable Empire. It's about kind of a goth girl who gets these cute little magical creatures and kind of the conflict between those two worlds. Quite charming, fun book, and the kids are going to love that. That's what I got for you. We'll see you next time. Thanks.